Okay, welcome
Okay.
to the Village Board, Village of Pleasantville. Today is Monday, May 23rd. We are in work session. Take it away.
Okay, so Peter forwarded an email that I sent him with some suggestions for amendments to the leaf blower law. But I'll just summarize them quickly. I think you know them. But what I said was that some of the themes that I noticed emerged during the public hearing, one was a desire for a level playing field. We heard from both those in favor of the law and those in opposition and those kind of in between, expressing a disagreement with the exemption for the golf course in particular. And another thing was the sense that the landscape companies would have difficulties making the necessary adjustments on the proposed timescale. And then, of course, a lot of frustration as well from those who feel that they're suffering from the presence of leaf blowers. So the suggestions that I proposed are that we put off the implementation of the law until next spring. So the law would go into effect on May 2023, which would allow everyone a full year to prepare for the implementation of the law, and it would also allow us to have an information campaign for an extended period of time. And it would also create more of an even playing field for everyone who needs to do something to get ready for it. I proposed removing the exemption for the golf course.
Which
yes.
Just to be clear, that proposed exemption had a 2-year sunset?
Correct. So in fact, it would in effect shorten the sunset. So it would still allow them a year to prepare, but they would have 1 year instead of 2 years to prepare. So it would shorten the amount of time that they have to prepare. It would extend the amount of time that everybody else has to prepare. There's also the question of the school district. I reached out to Steve Chamberlain and also to the superintendent, and they both feel strongly that they would like to maintain the exemption for the turf fields. So we can discuss that. The one thing I can say about the school district exemption is it is a very limited exemption the way it stands right now. It's for use on the turf fields after heavy rain, which is not something that is likely to occur very often.
Then that was acceptable to them?
Yes, that is
Okay.
acceptable to them. And we've also had a request from Holy Innocents with respect to the cemetery. My feeling is that if we don't allow an exemption for the golf course, we should not allow an exemption for them either. The final proposal that I made, in part, although not exclusively, to create that sense of compromise, for those who feel that this has been an issue that we've been discussing for years and who would like to see some relief, I propose that we could, in addition, further extend the quiet hours on weekends and holidays that currently exist in the noise ordinance. Shortening the window during which landscaping equipment is allowed either to 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. or 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Currently, they're allowed from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. And I also mentioned that one thing that I've heard in feedback from residents is frustration that on the weekend, which is a time of leisure, that it's difficult for them to, for instance, have people over for a barbecue in the evening or an outdoor dinner because the window in which lawn equipment allowed is long. And if you're curious, there are other municipalities that have similar regulations in place. So that's the gist of it. What do you guys think?
I love the idea that, first of all, I was having the same feeling as you during the last public input session. What people were saying about not, why should we give an exemption to the golf course, which is a private for-profit entity, makes perfect sense to me. And I did change my opinion during the session, and I agree that they probably shouldn't. The school, I think, because what they're doing is so specialized and it really has to do with the maintenance of turf fields, I think giving them an exemption, at least time to work that out, makes sense to me. And that's, all the people who support athletics and all of that probably should be interested in allowing that to work its way out. I also think it's a nice idea to give some people relief on Saturday. And I've heard the same thing that you have, the idea I can't have people over at 4 or 5 and have a barbecue because, it's a cacophony of lawn blowers all over. I guess the one place where I'm not there with other people on the board is, doesn't seem very complicated, this ban to me. And while I agree that starting Memorial Day would be far too fast this year, I don't really see why we couldn't do it in July and August. There's no leaves then, right? So you're really just blowing grass, essentially. I think this is more about resetting the expectations of the community than really changing the market competitiveness of the landscapers. Basically it's us saying to residents, hey, look, in order to make this place livable for the folks who want quiet enjoyment of their property, when there's not a really overwhelming reason. The strongest argument I think I heard for an August leaf blower is not wanting to track in grass,
This
to the
meeting
house.
is being recorded.
Okay, so forget everything I just said.
Is that a different meeting? Alyssa,
just
I was
looked at it.
already in and recording, right?
She just logged in, so it notifies her when she logs
Oh.
in.
But I can't mute it.
Just disconnect yourself from audio.
I'm just leaving.
I can mute you, right? Well, whatever.
That's fine.
So it's not that I'm not willing to compromise or be convinced, but like my initial thing is it's not really that complicated. Let's give them a month or 6 weeks or something. But is there a reason we can't do it this summer? Because these people have been waiting an awfully long time to get out of this nightmare, and I never heard the argument that was persuasive to me as to why you need leaf blowers in August.
Somebody else want to?
So the use of the need for leaf blowers in August is in the eye of the beholder, as we've clearly heard from lots of folks. My point, and I'm sympathetic to the idea of pushing it off to next year, since in effect what that really means is just losing a few months, right? And that strikes me as respectful of the many, many people who think that, who are either unbothered by this or who feel that it's an important part of their business, because whether you're a homeowner or a landscaper, if you feel the need to blow grass clippings in August, you got to buy a new device, right? So it seems to me that it is reasonable to say you've got until next year to buy it. That's where I am.
I think one thing to take into consideration too is that it might be difficult to get rid of the exemption for the golf course if we don't put off the start date for a year, because they will say they have to use leaf blowers to maintain the turf.
I mean,
obviously
right.
we don't have to go along with that, but that would be one consideration.
Do you think they're going to take a year or two need to raise the funding to buy some leaf blowers
Well,
that are electric?
That's a good point.
What can they do next year they can't do this year? I
Yeah.
mean, it's not like they
Yeah.
need 12 months of training to learn how to use an electric leaf blower.
Yeah, that's a good point. What do you think, Michael?
Well, I agree with David that I cannot think of a residential use for a gas-powered leaf blower in July and August. That cannot be solved by other methods. Whereas I certainly can see very many good uses for them in October and November. So I agree with that idea. My one counterpoint about landscaping companies is that a lot of them are on 9-month contracts, and so we would be changing the terms of the contractual relationship with their constituents if they were on a expectation of service for this, for a 9-month contract.
and the contracted price.
Well, what is the?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
what's the?
well, that's what I mean. I mean the
Yeah.
price, really.
What's the experience of other communities? Are the contractors losing? So I don't losing margin, not losing revenue. Are they? Is there? are they having to discount their price based on the fact that they're not blowing, the straight grass in those other months, or has it just sort of gone along and people's expectations?
I haven't
change?
seen like a systematic study of that, but I haven't. That's something that I could look into more. But I was just going to add one other thing, which is that I also don't love the idea of putting it off for a year. But one thing to me that argues in favor of it is that most communities, well, let's put it this way: we're in a similar place that Newcastle was if we pass the law now and the law goes into effect now, which is meaning that we would have to have a very soft landing. We wouldn't be able to enforce it
Right.
until July, maybe August. And personally, I think that there's an argument to be made for having a start date where we enforce it as soon as it begins, where it feels like it's a real thing. So
And that-
I just am adding that.
Just
the
to add to that,
conversation.
that would give us an on-ramp for public messaging in the spring, where we would have a sign over Bedford Road like we just had put up for the Fireman's Parade, that
Yeah.
kind of announcing in advance of May 15th, 2023 that this is all really happening.
Well, further-
Newcastle has
we could do
has
that
the-
at the Fireman's Parade in June.
Well, we won't have passed a law by
Yeah.
then.
Well, okay.
Wait, what? We
let's-
can't pass the law by June? I thought we were.
By the Fireman's Parade, June 3rd?
I thought we were doing it tonight. No.
We are not.
Well,
Oh,
we
okay.
if we make any
So,
changes,
yeah.
then we have to.
If we were to make changes in this proposed law, as we're discussing right now, it has to sit for at least 10 days before we can take action. I got that right?
But couldn't we pass the law as it is and then go back and amend it in a separate?
Why would we do
Process?
that?
I don't know, just to get it in place.
But I mean, we'd passing a law without the accommodations that are being proposed in
And I don't think
respect
that's a
of
good
people.
practice.
Okay.
Paul, what do you think?
So I am also in belief that I think we should put this into effect for next year. I do think that addresses then the business owners that are going to be affected by this, like the points that you made here, that they have in different contracts, and they're going to charge their customers more, all those kind of things need to be thought out a little more, and I think this will give them that. But it'll also give us more time to really plan how we're going to push this forward, if there's any kind of programs that we can encourage people about trade-ins or things like that. It'll give us a lot more time. So I think in that aspect, I think it's better going that way. I do believe that the school exception, because of what they're using, it's not really for leaves. I think that should go forward. And it's only when it rains heavily, which, it's a very unique kind of situation. Plus, in that area specifically, there are homes, but not homes close enough where you can say there's literally a home next door to that. I am supportive that the golf course shouldn't have any kind of exception. Lastly, looking at the date specifically, I was also a bit open. Like, I know we're picking, I believe, is it May 12th? Is it May 15th? May 15th. I'm okay with that date, but I also would be okay with like a June 1st date start.
Which was the request of a couple of the landscape firms,
Right.
indicating that May is a heavy growth season for grass. Right?
So I think, in talking to some people that work in this, or like, well, if you're going to do it, at least can you at least do it as far as you can? And I think in the difference of those 15 days, I think, it's 15 days, I get it, but it's, we're still moving towards a direction, which I think a lot of people who are against it are afraid that we're going towards this direction, and then we could always scale it back to longer if we really see a problem, but we're making huge progress by just putting this in place. And in regard to why not just put it in right away? Like I said, I think there's just so many things that we control over just on a government way of implementing a new law and change that I think can be reasonable somewhat for both sides. Because at the end of the day, the people that have been wanting this for so long, they're gonna get it. So at least for them, they're like, all right, I'm gonna have to live with this for a few more months if you really think about it, but knowing that change is coming. In comparison to the people that have lived with this forever, who are now being told, you're not gonna be able to do this again, ever again. So I think it's being a bit sympathetic to everyone who's opposing it as well. So those are my thoughts.
I guess I'm just going to say this and then I'll give up. And I probably do. No, I do. I'm not going to vote for that one thing, but I know that it'll probably go through and that's completely fine. But I guess my perspective is that this is not, the arguments are not equal on both sides. It's not a he said, she said. It's more like my child, first of all, we open the windows around now, right? And so what happens, this is the summer we're talking about. It's an entire summer. It's really for people who are living outside and inside. This is the season that you come out and you really enjoy what the village has to offer. And so it's a whole year that we're really taking away from those people in that sense. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we should, even if we do this, I don't think we should underestimate the fact that, the people who are having babies who are not getting to sleep, those babies will not be in the same stage of life when this goes into effect.
I mean, just to be clear, if we were to enact it at the earliest possible date, it's likely that it could conceivably take effect in July.
Right.
So it would be July, August, September. October 1, leaf blowers are allowed again. So
yeah.
I'm not arguing with you other than to say it's not taking a year out of people's lives. It's 3 months.
What I'm trying to say is that in terms of the outdoor life of the village, the summer is the year. Just like the same way, if we said we're only going to take 3 months out of the pool schedule,
no, that's true.
It'd be like, well, that's it.
It is a year.
Yeah.
So, what?
And I don't. Let me just finish the thoughts that I had. And I guess I am very sympathetic to the small businesses. I've worked my entire career helping small businesses, but I don't see the same level of risk. I understand they explain the risk, but anytime you make a change that affects small businesses, you hear about the risk. And to me, it's more us doing our part to help homeowners understand that, there's no leaves to speak of. We're not talking about debris. If there's a major storm or something like that, we can create an exception to this.
We already have that.
Yeah, and that's already in the law. So this is really more about, about the question of, are they going to lose business if people can't have the expectation of their lawns looking like a jet could land on them in the middle of the summer. And I just don't see that that's the likely outcome, absent experience from another village that's already gone through this that suggests it is, but that's not what we've heard so far.
Yeah. I wanted to respond quickly to your suggestion about June 1st. I personally oppose that. I think that May 15th is the start date for most of the similar laws around Westchester, so I think it puts us in alignment with the rest of Westchester, A. And B, conceptually the idea of this law is that it allows for gas-powered leaf blowers during spring and fall cleanup. Spring cleanup is long over by May 15th. So that's my 2 cents. I wanted to also mention something to you guys, which is that Alyssa called me with some good news the other day, which is that our Climate Smart program is potentially eligible for another $5,000 grant and a $10,000 grant, and we're looking into the possibility of using the $10,000 grant to have a rebate program for landscapers.
Oh, that's great.
And I'm also going to possibly reach out to the county and the state about that as well. What do you guys think about the weekend hours, about adjusting the weekend hours? That's one way, David. I feel like it's not everything, but I feel like it's something that we could implement now. So I would propose that would go into effect for this summer. Mm-hmm. So that would go into effect immediately because it doesn't require any kind of adjustment in terms of people's practices, except in the duration of hours. And so it would give people who want some relief immediately, understanding that they would have to wait longer for the law to go into effect.
And that's a 2-hour change each day?
So, okay.
2 hours, shortens the window by 2 hours? Is that correct?
Yeah, so, so it depends on whether you want people to be able to sleep in or just to give them a little bit more time in the evening. I remember, Paul, I spoke to you. Paul suggested 9 to 5 because you can speak for yourself, but my understanding was that you thought that would give people time in the morning if they wanted to do their gardening in the morning. but then by 5 p.m. people would have quiet. I had originally suggested 10 to 5, but I'm open to either.
I said 9 because I think a lot of parents seem to get up early sometimes, and they want to get some things before they get on their way.
And further, you know, whether we allow, as I think we need to, construction work and all of that to be going on. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think 9 to 5 seems like a reasonable number, and I don't really know how many people were doing lawn work after 5 on Saturday, but apparently some. So that seems like a reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, just anecdotally, I couldn't have a conversation in my backyard at 7 p.m. the other night because of lawn work.
Really?
Oh yeah.
On a weeknight?
Yeah.
Or a week?
Yeah, on weeknight. So
They're working late, these guys.
Well,
Right. Is that a service or?
yep.
So I know my neighbor from across the street, I don't think he even knows this public hearing is happening, but this is something he talks to me about on a regular basis.
All right, so we need to go to Bob DeBruin here. We can return to this unless, you know, there's a general sense of what, as a group, we're willing to propose in the context of the public hearing about the ways in which what had been previously presented would be tweaked.
So can I sum up? David, assuming that you're willing to agree with us, although not that you have to, the law would go into effect next May. We would remove the exemption for the golf course. We would keep the limited exemption for the school district, and we would also alter the quiet hours from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekends and holidays. Does that sound?
So what I'm saying is that I believe that that's what we'll do. I'm supportive of most of that, and I just want to record opposition on the one part.
I totally hear you.
Okay, and you can do so in the context of the
Yeah.
hearing.
Yeah, and just in terms of describing it to the public, calling it a school district exemption, I think is,
Problematic.
yeah, it doesn't,
Maybe
it's
a
not
turf,
accurate.
a turf
It's a
field,
turf field
turf
exemption.
rain.
Turf field exception after significant
Hard
rainfall, you know,
Yeah,
it's really
okay.
just one
That's a
thing.
good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree also with how Paul framed this as a compromise that no one is going to love. But when you look at the emails we've received and you look at the public hearing, it's a pretty divided issue. And so I think
For sure.
we are
yeah.
trying to represent how divided of an issue it is. And
And
No.
regardless of what any of us individually think on any given subject, when you have that level of disagreement on both sides, I think it's incumbent upon us to reflect that, and that's the year extension strikes me as a means of.
it also responds to the let the technology develop argument that was articulated at the public hearing as well. It gives another
Right.
year for those.
And which
For
we've
that, the batteries are getting better every year, and so.
Further, if we can get these
Yeah, so
the rebates, that's a great thing.
Right, exactly.
All right, so let's go to, we could return to that if we need to, but I think we've probably said enough, right? Bob DeBruin, do you hear us?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and we hear you.
You hear me now?
Yes, we do. So if you could,
Can you hear me?
we do hear you, yes.
Okay.
So if you could run us through your most recent analysis, that would be great.
Okie doke. I could do that. Have you all seen it? Did everybody get a copy of the letter?
We did. You want to share your screen, or shall I pull it up and share it? Is that of any benefit, do you think?
Yeah, I'll share my screen.
Okay. Okay, we see it.
You see it, okay. Okay, so when we last spoke, we had presented the report, and I think a question came up about how does the local rainfall data actually correspond to the numbers that we used in the report for rainfall, and secondly, what does that tell us about the risk to the pool and the cost risk involved that you're facing here. So the work in the report is all based on 24-hour rainfalls. This is standard operating procedure for drainage studies. And we use rainfall projections from something called the NOAA Atlas 14 mean values, and it's for, the location is for Westchester Airport. The table that we have up on the screen there is the table of information that we used in the report. So you can see that a 1-year storm has a expected rainfall of 2.8 inches or more, a 2-year storm 3.6, and so on. The meaning of the 1-year storm, the real meaning of it is that it has a 1% chance, I'm sorry, 100% chance of occurring in any single year. A 100-year storm has a 1/100% chance of occurring in a given year, so a 1%.
Right, and so.
A 10-year storm has
right.
a 10% chance, a 50-year storm a 2% chance.
And just to be clear, because I think some folks get stuck on, a 10-year storm. You can have a 10-year storm, and the odds of having another one are the same the next week, right?
In technically speaking, yes. So
Right.
there's two ways of looking at that. So a 10-year storm, something that has the probability of happening, a 10% probability of happening once in a year, has a 1% probability of happening twice in a year.
Right.
10% times 10%.
But just, to be
But it
clear,
doesn't preclude it happening.
right, it's not like jury duty. You have it once and then you're off for a while for sure.
Yes, you don't get a notice with this.
Right.
Can I ask a question? Is there any attempt to factor climate change into these figures?
Let me go through a little bit further here what we've done. There is a bit of an attempt in there. You can see that these numbers are a little conservative compared to actual data for the past 75 years.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go to this next set of tables that we did in here, we basically made a list of all the storms. The data for Westchester Airport goes back to 1948. And so we categorized all the storms by their rainfall amount. So a 2-year storm, which, back here was indicated as 3.6 inches of rain or more.
Mm-hmm.
We're showing all the dates that happened through the last 75 years. Total number of times it happened was 31 times. So in the 75-year period or 75.5-year period, the apparent return period for that storm was 2.4 years. So it's, a little bit less than a 2-year storm on a percentage basis. As we worked through it, we then went to the 5-year storm. That was all the storms that had more than 4.8 inches of rain in 24 hours. Apparent return period on that, 6.3 years. And then as you get to the larger storms, the return periods get more conservative relative to actual data. So you have 4 10-year storms in the last 75 years. Rainfall of at least 5.5 inches. Apparent return period closer to 20 years, 19. And finally, a 25-year storm we got up to has an apparent return period of almost 38 years. So I think that's your indication that they're being conservative in terms of their projections of what's happening into the future. So again, if I now just go back and summarize this data here, you have the various 24-hour rainfalls, the NOAA return periods, and there's the NOAA probability of that happening in a given year. And then we have the actual return periods, which convert the probability of happening in a given year. And so you see the 2-year storm, 50% probability according to NOAA, 42% probability according to actual data. The 5-year storm, 20% by NOAA, 16%. 10-year storm, 10% by NOAA, 5%. 25-year storm, 4% by NOAA, 2.5%. So again, those are giving you an indication that NOAA is being conservative here in terms of their predictions, and therefore, our calculations are on the conservative side. I just want to go back to the tables above, because what we also did in here, which I skipped over, is the highlighted lines in these tables. The yellow lines are storms that actually happen during the summertime. We define the summertime in these tables as starting on May 15th and going to Labor Day. Our rationale there was we were trying to look for what's the risk of, if you have a storm event, the pool having to be closed and you losing use use of and loss of revenue. So simple logic would say, since the pool season is May 15th to September 8th is the season that we used here. So you have basically 2.5 months of the year of the 12-month year. So the probability of that storm, of a 10-year storm, if it's, a 10% chance that it's going to happen in any of the 12 months, then it's going to be some portion of that, maybe a 4% chance of it happening in the summer months when it would have an impact on your operations. So in each of these tables, we did the number of storms between, I'll call it the summer months, 5-15, and the return period on those. So a 2-year storm becomes an 11-year storm. And I'm just going to jump up here to a 10-year storm, which becomes close to a 40-year storm of actual stuff that would have affected the pool season. So the probability of that is starting to go way down. So when I went back and thought about this from a risk analysis point of view, there's sort of 3 risks that you have experienced in the past or have the potential to experience. One is that risk of losing time during the pool season. The second is risk of damage to pool filter and pump equipment. And the third is just the plain cleanup cost of getting a whole bunch of mud in the pool and what it takes to get that out. Looking at those risks and looking at them with respect to the storm, it takes something more than a 10-year storm for you guys to get flooding. So you can ignore the 2 and the 5-year. You have only had 2 storms going back here. Here's the 10-year storms. So we had one on September 1st, one on September 8th, are the only 2 that we've had in 75 years that have occurred during the summer season. Obviously, a storm on September 8th, that would have been Labor Day that year. So that's a sort of no harm, no foul from a loss of use point of view. Last year, you had the storm, I think it was Hurricane Ida, and lost the last week of pool season. So effectively in 75 years, you would have lost one week of pool season. So I think of that as a reasonably negligible risk. I don't know what your actual cost losses were associated with that last year, whether you had to do refunds or what happened there. That basically leaves the 2 other risk factors that we talked about. One is damage to the pool equipment, filter equipment, which you have had in the past, because all the filter equipment was located below grade. So that when the pool area floods, the filter room flooded. The new pool design that you're having is moving all of that equipment, that vulnerable equipment above, up to grade level. So that damage risk goes away simply by the design you're putting into the pool. The second risk that you had was the cleanup, which based on some conversations we've had, we sort of concernedly estimated at $75,000 each time that you had to incur those cleanup costs. And that I think that's generous, because I think some of that cost in the past has actually included, repairs to pump motors and that sort of thing. So anyway, if you look at, okay, I have a $75,000 cleanup cost. If that happened once every 10 years, being, really liberal, because we really think it's probably happening. In the past, it's been happening less than that, closer to once every 20 years. But use the once every 10 years, the NOAA value. So the way you calculate the benefit of not having that loss when you use, I used a FEMA benefit cost ratio protocol, which is a protocol that you use when you're applying for grant money from the federal government to determine your benefits. And the protocol basically says, whatever the benefit is in the first year, you put that down as the first year. anytime that you incur that benefit there and down the line, you discount it by 7% per year. It's their methodology. So I assumed that, we had a storm in year 1, had a storm in year 10, right down to year 30. So the total benefit that you get in that kind of analysis is $142,000 over the 30-year period. Brought back to today's dollars. So the smallest project that we looked at here in terms of making an improvement to handle improved flood conditions was from a 10-year storm or 10-year or greater storm is on the order of $600,000. So your cost benefit ratio, or your benefit cost ratio is about 0.25. If your benefit cost ratio isn't greater than 1, then FEMA is going to tell you the project's not worth doing. And they would certainly, reject any grant application on that basis. So I think you're kind of left in the position here that, this doing one of these major drainage infrastructure improvements as part of the pool project does not make economic sense to you.
All right.
That's that in sum.
Thank you for that. Delivered with great clarity as always, and we had been through this previously. So, anybody have questions, inquiries of any sort?
Thank you.
I mean, my sense of this is that your clear analysis suggests that we should not undertake these flood mitigation efforts as part of building the new pool.
That's correct. Yeah. I think if I was sitting in your seat, that's where I would come from.
All right. Do we agree collectively?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any comments from anybody who may be listening or watching here to ask further questions to Bob before we sign him off?
Seems like there's some people in the audience with passing familiarity with this project.
Do you want to add anything, Charles? No?
All right. Thank you, Bob. We appreciate it, and we release you to the rest of your evening.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
So Eric and
Take
Peter,
care.
I just want to say this is really good analytic follow-up, because when we started this, the natural path we would have followed is to say, well, we got to be careful to mitigate against flood risks, and by actually looking at the cost of the risk and comparing that to how often we would do it, we realized that we would not be completely solving a problem that we would not experience that often. So,
I mean, what we knew for starters is that, as Bob was clear right at the beginning, even the grandest iteration of a mitigation effort would not have
stopped
stopped
Hurricane Ida.
a
Right?
Hurricane Ida scale problem. So,
Yeah, I think that's the real problem.
yeah, I mean, we've got a couple of related questions to pursue, including whether we should spend somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 to put in an improved mechanism to allow us to raise and lower the level of the pond. Jeff and Mario are of the view that boots on the ground, it feels like that's helping. Bob has been clear in his analysis that it probably doesn't produce enough detention capacity to materially change, certainly wouldn't in an Ida situation, but it certainly may in more modest storms. Likely, I mean, we're obviously not only thinking about mitigation of risk to pool, but to the extent that we can, mitigating risk all the way downstream, down Lake Street to the folks on Arbec, cross Broadway down to Seneca, and ultimately all the way to the Water District Field and the Four Corners and Thornwood. So in a big storm, that's all overwhelmed. In a smaller storm, any capacity we have to detain water and release it more slowly is good. It's just that, as Bob was clear right from the start, we've got, 850 some odd acres of hillside draining all through Mount Pleasant and Pleasantville down into Nannahagan Pond. And when there's a big storm, that's a whole big catchment area. So we don't have to solve this tonight, but I'm personally inclined to think we probably go ahead with the engineering of of that $50,000 to $100,000 project at Nannahagan Pond. And if you guys are inclined to agree with it, we can release Bob to do the detailed design for it.
And just so you know, right now the way that the water level is lowered is we actually send staff members into a pit to remove these wooden planks.
Oh.
So
Oh, wow.
yeah, to
Not a great.
That's sort of medieval.
correct.
Not a great mechanism.
Right.
So, do we have general consensus to
Yeah, to
Yes.
spec it out.
let
Sure.
Bob spec that out?
Sure.
Okay. All right, great. So
Was the one question I guess I didn't think to ask him, but the $75,000 number for the cleanup cost, was that provided by us or was that
Yeah,
provided by him?
By us. So I guess it was 4 years ago. The motors actually got damaged.
Okay.
because the pit, they sit in a underground room and it flooded.
That's right.
So that'd be a
And that will be less of
conservative
an
number
issue.
going forward, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
That was about $35,000 to $40,000 to get replacement motors, and then the rest was damage. And actually, at that point, the village was contracting out cleaning the pool. So that is a conservative number. Now we clean it in house. We have
So
staff.
with the pump room in a safer place, that would remove that $35,000 number from that as well?
Right, there's still some threat to the motors because the motors have to be water level, but they do have products where the system will shut down once it does detect
Mhm.
material.
So
Good.
it doesn't, pump that through.
That's definitely worth getting.
Right.
Mhm.
But there's some neighboring municipalities that have had their pump rooms, the electric, destroyed because it's below grade, and that's
And it's not just garden variety electric. I mean, there's quite a complicated system there. So, including, I recall 4 years ago when we replaced the motors, the qualified electrician had wired them up and then wasn't working right, came back and realized that there was some complicated multi-phase service, and that had to be modified as well. So it's a big deal. There's a whole lot going on there.
right.
All right. Last item on our work session agenda was continuing the discussion about the use of ARPA funds. So, obviously we have zillions of uses for these funds. I think the core question is whether we would carve off a piece, as you suggested, David, for a social service function. You want to repeat how that might work?
Yes, so I would suggest carving off around $20,000 out of this 600 and some odd $1,000. The first use would be for job retraining, specifically for scholarships for Westchester Community College, for people looking to upskill or get. And remember, they have training for jobs that exist. This is in advanced manufacturing. It is in nursing and other jobs related to the healthcare system in a few different areas. As a backup, if that's not used within the fiscal year, then I propose that it could also be used to support some limited scholarships to our after-school program to allow low-income parents to be able to manage their kids between school and end of the day.
So, obviously, those are all worthy goals. My question about that is, who and how would we manage that? The application, the qualification, the follow-through on all of that?
Yeah, we can work with Westchester Community College to put together a program.
Well,
Yeah, what we have to do is we have to publicize it. That's more the issue.
But we would make available this sum of money, and WCC would vet, validate, qualify, enroll people, so we wouldn't be in the middle of that at all.
I think that would be the idea. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So they would have to tell us if a resident. We could confirm that somebody is a resident, and they would have to tell us if a resident came forward looking for those grants.
But they have a mechanism to qualify folks based on income and all of that. I mean, it's not just anyone. You have to have an income
No,
qualification.
that's not. No, that would not be an income qualification. These are just people who are looking to upskill.
Anybody.
Yeah, anybody who's a village resident who wants to move, let's say, from from either high school or from being unemployed or from, an inferior hourly job into a career.
And so how would that, what qualifies as upskilling? I'm just asking the question. It's not that I
No, it's
disagree with the idea, but for example, WCC offers all kinds of programs that folks might be interested in. I want to learn Excel, I want to learn
these are
Photoshop.
this is a specific set of programs that are in industries that are identified as having jobs available, needing what's called intermediate training, so less than a year of training. So usually in the 3 week to 5 or 6 months at the outside training. That where we've identified employers that need people with these skills.
Right, and so WCC presumably does that on an ongoing basis. So, for example, you had suggested if it isn't used in the fiscal year, it would pivot to scholarships to Panther Club, for example.
Right.
And then we're in the circumstance again that, although that's a desirable goal, we don't have a mechanism to qualify that.
We can use for Panther Club. We can use S-chip just the way that we do for our summer.
And what would be the level of scholarship we would potentially offer? We just have to put the parameters around that.
Yeah, we'd have to basically divide it among the applicant pool.
Okay, the alternative, I'm not arguing one way or the other at the moment, but the alternative would simply be leave it in the WCC program.
We could
until the point at which it's been exhausted, right?
I just don't have a sense of if we're successful, then I think that would be fine, but I'm not sure. And a lot of this depends on a whole bunch of complicated questions about the economy that are hard to predict in advance.
So, do you know what the tuition is for the kinds of programs like the advanced manufacturing program?
They're in the sort of $1,000 to $2,000 range, most of them.
So, conceivably, $20,000 if used in those programs could serve between 10 and 15 people.
Something like that.
So.
It seems like a reasonable sort of amount without getting crazy.
So look, I think that the spirit behind that is good. I just and I am much more sympathetic to it if WCC can provide that service to us, because we're not in, we don't have a social service operation.
I think the one thing that we need to do is engage our communications team to, if we do this, to talk, because the real game is most of these people who are working for $7 an hour or $15 an hour or whatever don't realize, hey, I can't afford to live in any of Westchester County, and I'm doing something that feels like a lot of work to me. But if I were working on a CNC, computer controlled manufacturing machine, I could be making $50,000 and actually have a career that I could start to build a family with. We have to communicate that because they're not able to get that message out. So I think that's the bigger part here.
All right. Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I think it's a good, we've discussed in the past, I think it helps with the workforce.
Okay. Michael, any thoughts?
No, this is the new program, right? This is the one that just launched.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Right, the one they spoke to us about when they didn't.
Yeah, I think it's great.
All right. There we go. So let's. Can WCC give us a proposal of some sort that describes how that works?
We'll follow up with that.
Okay, great.
Okay.